Ah,
Hello.
Hey,
magic.
fantastic.
Sweet Jesus.
Are we disturbing your lunch? Where are you?
Yeah, no, you look great, but you always look great.
Oh my God. I'm just in my office. I turned it around because if I sit at the desk, I think it's too dark. And if I sit here, I think it's too light.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you so
fantastic.
much for joining us.
I've been looking forward to it. Thank you both. Thank you both.
You know, your songs have always been very romantic, but like stories of the underdog. That's always been you've always punched up, which is great, but not in such a sort of way that's rooted in the harsh reality of where we are, I would say.
True. I've always tried to be the hopeless optimist. I think it was a product of where I was brought up and when I was brought up that led me to that kind of a viewpoint as a writer. We could write a darker song or a darker record, but growing up in middle class New Jersey during the John Kennedy era of America led you to be an optimist.
Do you think not having Richie around helps you as a writer to be more personal on this album? And
good question. Really good question. Yeah, I think that has been somewhat true, especially because of the subject matter that the world dealt us. So I couldn't have written This House Is Not For Sale and used that imagery as a song because I wouldn't have been writing that song if the band were whole. I wouldn't have been in that place emotionally and then ultimately physically, and the toll it took on me had I not gone through that hell. So now that I'm clearly, finally through that, I was able to write differently, and I'm grateful for it because these last 7 going on 8 years, they weren't good. It was a fight for me physically and emotionally, and everything that's threatened to be taken away from you, and it wasn't of your own doing. It was tough, but he had issues that he just couldn't deal with under the umbrella of the band, and it was heartbreaking.
Even though the band is called Bon Jovi, or and I think, by the way, I think that's a piece of brilliance, because everybody pretends that are in bands that they're a complete democracy, but everyone knows they're never really democratic bands. There's always some guys, and I think that took the pressure off the others. It was called Bon Jovi. It was your band, but they were also in it. But you were a gang, most certainly were a gang. Oh, yeah. And I think and the 4 of you in particular. And I think, losing Richie must have been pretty tough for you.
It's my right hand, it's Bruce losing Clarence, it's Mick losing Keith. It's but even the God blessed Beatle Paul went on.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to him about it, and I've spoken to Bruce about it. And I tell you, I don't have many regrets in this business or in life, but if I could have an opportunity to sit down with Jagger and talk to him about his experience with Keith, I would embrace that.
I want to just go back to that thing you were talking about the band and the gang and all of that, and something that I noticed in the documentary film you made a few years ago about when you're on tour is the sense of family that you like to create in your organization. You have this beautiful moment when you hand out medallions to people who serve you well and have been in your team for a long time. And there's the real sense, and I think it might be the Italian in you, but that sense of family and loyalty to the family that you aspire to.
At the time, I was also aware of it, and that was because of Elvis TCB, if you remember the little lightning bolt TCB, taking care of business. And it was at the height of Slippery When Wet. And so I made these little gifts for our absolute innermost band and the crew, just like the innermost circle of the crew. And they caught on because this little nothing, this predates rap and guys with big bling and all. I mean, it's not much bigger than a thumbnail, it's teeny and it's not expensive. And I gave these 13 of them out. They were treasured. And then the next tour, I gave a couple of more. And then I said, if you do 2 world tours and you do the entire world tour, then you could qualify for one. And I know, you know, that mine, I buried with the guy that put a guitar in my hand the first time. You know, I only know of one of a guy that sold his.
A rat.
You know,
Yeah, right, yeah. No one's heard from him. Apparently he's in witness protection, but no one's heard nothing about him for a while.
yeah, for a while.
Hey, he must
One guy ever, but no one ever. You know, they meant a lot to everybody, and so I guess there's about 120 of them maybe over this 35 years. But yeah, it's still a thing in our organization. Yeah.
Do you know what, John? Sorry, jumping off, and this is almost like another interview, but the one thing I would really love to hear about from you is, because funny enough, I spoke to Tim Pierce yesterday, the legendary session guitarist.
My God.
Who about a project we did years ago, a thing called Toy Matinee. But he and he played on Runaway, on the demo of Runaway, I believe. But because I mentioned I was going to be speaking to you, because what I want to know is, when you started out, you were kind of sweeping up and stuff at the power station, right?
Correct.
But this is in the absolute glory days of the power station. Yes. I mean, that must have been amazing. I mean, what was, you know, the stuff that was going, this is like Let's Dance period, isn't it? Or before that? Or, you know, come on, man, come on.
Yes. So I didn't even know the second cousin, Tony Bon Jovi. He had produced the first Ramones record, the first Talking Heads record, with a guy named Lance Quinn, who was his production partner. And this guy Tony, and a guy named Bob Walters came from a place called Media Sound, build this place called the Power Station. But I don't know this man. I'm playing in bars. I'm, you know, just in my own original. I'm the singer in someone else's original band, and graduating high school. And my dad calls his cousin and says, would you come to this bar and see my kid? Because he's hell-bent on just, this is it for him. And let me know if he's wasting his time. And the guy came and he says, the band stinks, but the kid's got something special. You know, good luck.
The band stinks, but the kid's
got bad stinks. Yeah. He goes, he was honest. And, you know, the band did break up shortly thereafter. And in September of that year, keeping an original band together was very hard. Back in New Jersey in the early 80s, the way to make money playing music was playing covers. Yeah. So having an original band, there was no money in it. But I realized I quit my own cover band and said, unless you go and write your own stuff, there's no future in this. And so there was 2 things that were happening in New Jersey at the time. Cover bands making $3,000 a night 40 years ago, and original bands making $100 a night to split. Yep. I chose to do that because I saw what the future was. And so anyhow, getting back to my opportunity to go to the Power Station, I called the guy in September of 1980, getting out of high school. And I says, can I do anything? Can I just do something? He said, sure, you come to New York, come over to the studio. And they eventually paid me $50 a week to be the gopher. And then if it was a weekend or late night, I could go in and they would just keep a tally and said, basically, if you ever make it, you got to pay us back. So it was basically like a spec deal. And so, you know, I did pay him. He got to co-produce the first album and Sayonara.
Well, who did you see around the studio?
Let me tell you what I saw, because no one believes what I saw. I witnessed the Bowie and Freddie singing the vocals to Under Pressure.
Oh,
whoa.
It was, I looked right through the window of Studio A, and I reconfirmed this to another cousin of mine. It's the Italian thing again, who was also working in the studio. I said, weren't we there then? He says, yeah. So go and look at that vocal credit. The vocal was done at the Power Station.
Oh, well, yeah, because we always thought, because the recording was done in Switzerland, wasn't it?
But not the vocal. If I'm not mistaken, 41 years
I don't think there are other people that look like Freddie and Bowie singing at the same time.
Yeah, well, the Sparks, maybe. No, I don't know.
Yeah, the Sparks, exactly. But Niall and Bernard and Tony, Sheik was always, they were in B every day, and he was they were the nicest, sweetest guy.
Yeah.
I was shortly after John Lennon was killed, and I had a band, and we were rehearsing a few blocks away, and I'll never forget this, getting out of a cab, counting out my change to pay the cabbie. So we're sort of tucked in, and the Stones got out of whatever car it was they were getting out of. The Stones, at the same time, going into the studio, and a photographer jumps out of a trash bin, and paparazzi starts taking pictures.
Jack in a Box.
I swear to God, this is true.
Hack in the Box.
The Stones, they open up the door of the studio. Wyman, whoever else was there, was Mick and Keith. They go in to the studio. I finish counting the change. We jack up, my little, teenage friends, jack the photographer and shoo him away because I can go in the studio. They buzz us in the studio. Wyman is holding the door open and lets us in. The photographer screaming, Mick, give us a picture. I swear to you, he grabs me and these kids and he says, here's my new band, the Frogs. And we took a picture.
Oh my God. Have you ever seen it? Is it ever been published?
No, because I thought the photographer was Ron Galella. I don't know who the photographer was. I thought it was Ron Galella because that picture exists of me at 18.
Have you mentioned this? Have you mentioned this before?
Yeah, I have.
To Mick,
thinking that no, I don't know Mick Jagger. I don't know him. But true story. But I'm telling you, Bruce had just finished The River, and little Steven was making one of his solo albums, and I got to do hand claps on it. And I mean, it was Devo coming through the ceiling because where we'd sleep upstairs in the apartment, you'd hear the sounds reverberating from Studio C at the time. So the crazy things of the people, and the greatest lesson I learned there was the bigger the star, the nicer the person. It was the guy that you don't hear about today who was not cool.
Yeah.
The Stones were cool. Hey kid, how's those demos going? Or even though I had met Bruce back on the shore, they were always kind. They were always incredibly kind because they knew me from down on the shore. Bernard and Niall and those guys could not have been more gracious.
So what was your template, John? What made, because
if that was the storytelling and the performer, that would be the foundation. I would say that those two things came from the E Street Band and from Southside for sure. They were killer performers and storytellers. Then if it was the singing, because I think that those two guys are stylists, and I've worked hard to be a better technical singer. There would be guys like Steve Perry from Journey. And then there was the 80s rock band thing of Van Halen, that when that band, the original band broke up in 1984, that was a good thing for the creation of Bon Jovi. You had the good looking kid singer who could really sing. And by the way, was a hell of a performer who knew how to tell you a story. So this was something different. And when we got lumped into that LA, bands of my era and my ilk, I wasn't comfortable. We said, wait, that's not who we are. And we went, it was not who I was. We knew what. The first date I took my wife on was Sam and Dave. I wasn't listening to heavy metal in the parking lot. It wasn't my thing. So all those little things, the storyteller, the lyricist, the performer, but a better singer, and the cute thing. And that all paid dividends.
You've been inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame as well, and songwriting is what you do. But obviously those first two big hits, Living on a Prayer, there was another songwriter brought in to work with you. I've forgotten his name now.
Desmond Child.
Desmond Child, yeah.
And obviously they were utter smashes, Did that leave you feeling a little bit shaky about how you could take this off on your own?
Well, it's a little bit the opposite. I had written Runaway before there was a band, and there was no band. And then the second record, we're trying again, and David and I co-wrote the first single on that record, and then I wrote the subsequent second and third one. The third record, what we had witnessed from afar in our frustration was that Bryan Adams, and this was the example, was writing songs for other people, and it was Tina Turner at the time, and he was getting these videos with her and playing on bigger stages, and I sort of saw myself in that kind of, well, why aren't we getting those shots? And why are we getting lumped in with Rat and Motley Crue and this and that when that's not who we are? So we initially, and this is the truth, said, well, if we could write songs for other people, and I didn't know how. I didn't know how you did that. And a record company guy named Derek Schulman.
Oh my God, from Gentle Giant.
Yeah, he was my A&R guy.
Who would have thought prog rock Gentle Giant from Scotland have got anything to do with Bon Jovi?
We always get a prog link, no matter who we speak to. We always get a prog link.
Love it.
Well, Derek was the one that told me how you go about it with publishers and recommended this guy. And I knew Desmond had a couple of albums because the poster for what was Desmond Child in Rouge hung outside the dressing room, the original bar band in Asbury Park. So I was aware of the name. And so I said, great, let's meet the guy. And so, by happenstance, we got together and wrote these incredible songs. And we said, I think we should keep them. That was the bottom line. And so, Prayer and Bad Name were two of them. But none of us had any major success. I had 2 gold albums. Desmond had 1 top 10 single. His own albums didn't do well. But he was obviously a very talented guy, and the three of us together. Same thing with Bruce Fairburn, who produced that third album. He was in a band called Prism. He had his biggest thing was a band called Loverboy. They didn't, he was fledgling as a producer. There was a young engineer by the name of Bob Rock. There was a city called Vancouver that nobody had made records in, for real, other than the people from Vancouver. And all of these people came together, and this magic called Slippery When Wet. And then Little Mountain Studios became the next generation's power station.
That's right. Yeah, it was the absolute
everybody.
What was that?
Everybody.
What was that like, though, John? Just writing that first song with Desmond, and do you remember it?
Yeah, the first one, because there was a song that didn't make it, and we gave to a movie. It was called On the Edge of a Broken Heart, and it was for a movie that we gave him called The Fat Boys, I think. And then subsequently Bad Name came, and then ultimately Prayer came. We thought we had a really good record. But at the time, and you're gauging this against the radio, it was like, if we could have something as anthemic as Robert Palmer had that big hit that year, Addicted to Love.
Yeah, I played on that album.
He played on the album.
Did you play on that song?
No, not on that. No, that was Bernard, who actually hired me to play on the album. I'm saying.
There you go.
21.
So right. Wow. So that power station and the band, the studio, blah, blah, blah. So we're thinking, like, if we can have a song that's like that, then I started thinking about anthems that work in an audience, having done a whole lot of touring by this time. You're thinking, I need these things called anthems. I need this. And so we started thinking like that. And then we started writing differently.
Yeah. My brother, who actually played in Spandau Ballet as well. He does a sort of 80s DJ thing that when the clubs are open, when we were all before pre-COVID, he goes around, he plays a bunch of 80s songs on stage to a couple of thousand people at a time, and it's all 80s, but the final song is always Living on a Prayer. That's the one, and everybody out there sings every single word, and it's become something bigger than the song you three guys sat and wrote.
Absolutely. It came from nowhere. None of us had an idea. The day we walked in the room, we came out with it finished, and I swear I told Richie, it's okay. But also in defense of that dumb statement, when he told me I was crazy, and he was right, there was no bass line.
Do you know what I was actually about to bring up? By the way, that's the one thing.
And the bass player has to get as a bass player.
It's a brilliant. The bass on that song is fantastic.
Yes, it is.
It's
yes,
really,
it is.
really great.
Yes, it is, and yes, it is. Yeah, and we're thinking
that's obviously not. That's obviously not what sells it. But it's. But
no,
it's just as an aside, it is a phenomenal phenomenal bit of bass playing and
Huey McDonald
arranging.
is
Yeah.
Hugh McDonald came up with that bass line. He was absolutely genius. We worked very hard on that. You know, it was like, we need something that's more Motown. We need something that's more Motown. And then we got that round, and it worked over all three chords. Because if you think about it, it's E minor, C, and D. There's not a lot. And we created the magic. And in the pre-production room, when Fairburn came down and we were in a demo studio, the bass line was developed. And then ultimately I was dumb and young and agreed to. I didn't come up with, that was a Desmond thing, the goddamn key change.
Oh yeah.
Musical theater moment.
Yeah. Embrace your inner Sondheim.
At 25, that's one thing. At 59, it's a whole nother symbol.
Well, you're very lucky it's a call and response song, you know, because you can just let the audience sing that high bit.